Hello, my name is Wilbert Banks, and this is Assignment 8, Monitoring and Sustaining the Plan. In the past, I created a video in which I discussed three focus areas that I will use for my current campus. I highlighted the following three focus areas. The first was to increase student transition from elementary school to middle school to high school, therefore ensuring that students have a connection as they go through from each campus to campus. We want to highlight the importance of looking at school curriculum, and on top of that, showing connections to organizations and groups and teacher awareness so teachers will understand the students and know the students prior to having them on campus. Secondly, we want to increase student involvement on our campus and within our community. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but that involves having more organizations and then on top of that, reaching out to the community to help us out. And finally, we want to find a transition for students that were not planning on going to college. There's students that wanted to just get directly into the working field. And in order to do that, we believe that it's important to enhance our CTE program and form partnerships with other organizations so these students can be ready to work after graduation. So within the next several slides, I'm going to look at a couple of things. I'm going to take each of these focus areas and I'm going to highlight the goals for each one. What do we gain from it? Secondly, I'm going to talk about the strategies that we will use in order to execute these. And then finally, we're going to talk about how we're going to mentor each of these guys. And then I'm going to wrap this up with a conclusion. So starting off, our first focus area was to create a smooth transition from elementary school through high school. Our goals for that was to create curriculum that was vertically aligned to increase student academic success as they progress from campus to campus. Secondly, we wanted to create a system that actively tracks students as they move from campus to campus. And then finally, we wanted to create a system of connection in which schools and communities play a role in academic, emotional, and physical maturation of the student. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing that we need to do is that we're going to start off each of these really. So this make sure that this is not like something new for each of the major categories, but I believe that everything needs to start off with a collaborative spirit, a goal that involves more than one person. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a committee. That committee is going to consist of high school leaders, middle school leaders, and middle school teachers, and elementary school teachers as well, and administrators. This committee is going to identify the needs of the community and the needs of each school, and it's going to start making and mending the plan for how to get those needs and those standards organized in which it can be something that's seen throughout each school within a feeder pattern. The second thing that we're going to do is that we're going to create collaborative groups. Once the committee is created, we're gonna start creating collaborative groups that's going to consist of teachers from elementary school and middle school and high school, not just the lead teachers for those schools, but now more individual specific groups. Those groups can be broken down into subject areas such as math or social studies or English and language arts. Furthermore, we can even add other groups. We have alignments in almost every area of the student. So, for instance, in athletics, we can talk about how PE teachers can align what they do with what middle school athletics do and middle school PE teachers do. And then on top of that, talking about how does that look in high school when you go to sports such as basketball and football and things of that sort. And some of the standards that are needed there. So in order to do that, they're going to have to create redirection and enrichment programs as well inside the academic part in which students that get off track, we can monitor these students actually quicker. Sometimes we get students in transition from elementary school to middle school or from middle school to high school in which students really falter a lot. And occasionally that information is missed because we have a lack of connectiveness. This strategy is there so we can have that connectiveness and that no information, nothing is really new as far as like, finding that. And when things are off, when a student does not, fall into the category or when there's not an answer, we can quickly resolve it by getting that student redirection or enrichment, especially when we're talking about curriculum. Number three, student organization groups from high school will meet with their counterparts in middle school and high school, if they exist, or create junior groups in elementary school and high school. Now, this is kind of like an interlink between one of my other topics, but the importance here shows that now students can actively be involved in organizations in elementary school. And not only that, they can start seeing if they exist in elementary school and they exist in middle school, certain clubs and organizations such as student council. Student council from high school can meet with middle school students and elementary school students, and students can start to see that connection between it. That enriches the interactions for the high school students. They get to show some leadership. And then on top of that, it allows for the elementary school students to see their counterparts and to look up to them and to see the expectations that are there for the higher levels. And as a result, we have a peer mentor program that's kind of built in without really technically having to build it in because these organizations are meeting. Furthermore, organizations that do not have a counterpart for elementary and middle school students, they can create junior groups for those in which that organization will still go and visit, but then on top of that, start to introduce the standards and things of that sort of their organization into those lower level groups as far as grade level, and they can start those things out. So it makes a lot of sense if I was a student and I was in like Key Club and I can start Key Club in high school, but to go into the elementary schools and start getting students involved in those organizations early, so they know what's expected of individuals in high school. And outside of that, Kiwanis is when you get out of high school. So strategies for this. We're going to have community socials at the high school that will involve staff, students from all feeder school patterns. Okay. The second thing that we'll like to do is that we'll like to create mentor programs. And these mentor programs will be from students, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, from high school going down to elementary school and middle school, or middle school going to elementary school. But on top of that, adding community uh, organizations to it as well, in which we can take community leaders that are sponsors for outside organizations, and they can also mentor our students as well. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to focus on the areas of alignment. What do we need to look at when we try to align these things? What are some things that are going to be important for us? We're going to first look at lessons, the expectations and the standards. We also want a common foundation. Sometimes it's difficult for students to transition from campus to campus because of the fact that they don't have a consistency in the foundations. If you ask many high school students, what were your expectations for how do you behave or how do you do things in middle school, a lot of those students will not have that connectiveness from that to high school. But by creating standards and norms that transition from campus to campus and having expectations that transition from campus to campus, it makes that transition for the students a little easier. Which also leads us to number three, having a common foundation. Having a common foundation means that what are the main things that we want our students to be able to do once they leave our campuses? Do we want them to be problem solvers? Now, that doesn't take away from the fact that I still have curriculum to teach, but if we want our students to be problem solvers, we have to be very proactive at moving our curriculum to a point in which students are being fed lessons in which that student is actually solving problems on a regular basis. And that's not just from high school. but it's for middle school and elementary school. And as a result, once we get those standards there, we can increase the rigor as students start to grow. Number four, expansion of student connections via clubs and organizations. I just hit on that earlier, so I'm not going to go in greater detail with that. And on top of that, that is also one of our next topics. Then the next part that we mentioned as well, athletics and other extracurricular activities. That's adding to the concept in many schools. Some students, of course, based off of UIL, no, they can't play, tackle football in elementary school. But some of the foundation, some of the footwork, some of the basic things that are expected for students in high school, those things can start being aligned early. Our district has a program called the Advanced Movers Program, in which students with athletic ability, they're monitored, and the needs of those students based off of how our high school programs look are met. So something of that sort would be important for this alignment process. The monitoring for this is going to be a timely process, and the reason why is because we're looking at student information over years, not just simply saying, let's go look at it from this particular year, but in order to see a growth in, let's say, student participation in outside organizations, or student participation in athletics, or let's talk about academics, student performance in ELC test or inside any type of standardized test or benchmark. In order to do that, it's going to take years of data in order to take it. But what is important is that you can easily still take throughout the school year data to see how the performance of students are doing. So how are we going to do this? Number one, we're going to track students' academic performance. Number two, we're going to team meeting notes. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to take the notes and the agendas and ensure that teams are meeting, that those teams are productive. Next, we're going to track student participation in organizations and extracurricular activities and all feeder patterns. After that, we're going to survey teachers, students, parents, and community leaders. And then finally, we're going to monitor the school's report card. We're going to look at, what's the data saying? And we're going to take that data, we're going to organize it inside of a user-friendly manner so we can really clearly get the results that, look at the data and see the results that we have. Our second major focus area was to increase in student involvement. By doing that, we had two goals for it: to increase the connectivity with the school and the community. Remember that education is not just what only takes place inside of the building. We want to get our students out to the world. We want to get our students out to our community. So when we just teach inside of our classrooms and expect for that information to stay there, that means that we're really doing students a disservice. Our goal is to get students and our community linked together because that's what determines how the community succeeds. Number two, we want to be able to aid in increasing student academic performance. One thing that data supports is that when students are more involved in their academic, inside their communities, when they're more involved by participating in extracurricular activities, those students perform better academically. So this is something in which we can monitor academic performance based off of students and that connectiveness. Really sad personal situation is that I have my oldest son felt like he was not connected to his school. As a result, he did not really care much about what grades he made and how he performed inside the classroom. But once he started making connections by having organizations inside the school and meeting with kids and having that relationship with students from organizations, that trickled also to his ability to perform inside the classroom. How are we going to do it? Number one, we're going to create a student organization advisory committee, just like we did with the last one. We're going to increase student organization services based off campus needs. We're going to actively present organizations to students. And I'm going to talk about that in just a few on how we're going to do that. We're going to invite outside organizations to the campus to aid in the process. We want to develop extracurricular activities and enhance the ones that we already have. We want to ensure that students understand what's available and what's offered to them. We want to create a community day in which the campus and organization and extracurricular activities are all represented, such as an ice cream social day, or maybe a dessert day or something of that sort. Uh, then on top of that, if possible, we're going to provide stipends for sponsors if we have the ability to do so. How are we going to monitor this? We're going to simply monitor the number of organizations and the number of members in each organization. We're going to also require sponsors to report this information to administration. Here's what's important about this information. Number one is that by doing this, we want to ensure that students, okay, have that link to the school. That's a big thing for us. And the other big part of this is that community aspect. Many of these organizations are going to go out into the community. They're going to distribute to the community. They're going to help the community. They're going to build the community up. So that's a really important aspect for us. Our last major category that we were looking at was to build the CTE program. And it wasn't just based off of building CTE for CTE's sake, but what we do understand in education is that the data supports of the students that graduate from high school in the state of Texas, 50% of those students um, attend college. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, what happens to the rest of that other 50%? What have we done to ensure success for those other students? So the goal for this is to give students, as we have heard it said, well, everyone can go to college. Well, if we say that, what's the other option? What are we doing as educators? What are we doing as administrative leaders? What are we doing as school districts to aid those students that do not have, that are not ready for college, or just simply don't want to go to college? Do those students have skills to get inside the job market? So we want to build our CTE program. And our goals for this is that we want to create a CTE advisory committee. We want to increase, we want to increase our CTE courses provided on local campuses by determining the needs of the students. And we'll create partnerships with local businesses that will aid in student employment for students receiving certificates. And then last, we're going to create mentor programs in which professionals from the community aid students in reducing their CTE goals. So these are the strategies that we're going to use in order to build our CTE program up. Remember, our goal is to provide options for students that do not necessarily go to college. So we're going to start off with a committee. And as I mentioned earlier, the other thing that we're going to do is that we're going to get the community involved with this as well. Locally, we have a lot of small businesses, personal businesses, and on top of that, large organizations in which degrees are not per se mandatory, but certifications are. So if you get partnerships with those local businesses in which students can be employed, in which those businesses can come in and say, hey, this is what we're looking at for these certifications, it's a benefit for the community and it's a benefit for our students. We want our students in this case to be prepared to be able to work. And then the last thing, obviously, is to create those mentor programs in which those businesses are represented, and on top of that, teachers and other leaders in the community. How are we going to monitor this? We want to collect various forms of data and constantly review it. We're going to track student success in the program after graduation as well. In order to see the real success of this, we're going to have tools and programs and access to students in which we keep up with students well after they graduate from high school. So this is an important thing on how we're going to do that. And the other part that's important about that is having the tools as far as like the technology to be able to contact these students and find out this data. So in conclusion, our goal is to increase student academic performance in schools by creating curriculum that is vertically aligned to ensure a smooth transition, increasing student involvement by promoting student organizations and community involvement. And furthermore, we want to ensure that our schools have answers for everyone by providing pathways that extend beyond traditional college education. With this said, these three focus areas, they take what we know to be right and they combine it to our regular culture to transition that culture so we can do what's best for our students. We want our students to be able to go from campus to campus with the idea that they feel comfort between each campus. They have expectations between each campus. Furthermore, we understand the connection that needs to take place by organizations and students having ownership in things that take place on that campus via organizations and extracurricular activities and things of that sort. And we want to build that part up. And last but not least, we want to ensure that all students, when we say all students, we want to make sure that when we're talking about the success of all students, that we have answers for students that are difficult for us in school. The students that may not want to go to college. Because when those students have answers, when they have pathways, our entire community get better. And that's what we want for our students and our community. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.